We just want you here, sir,
Thank you.
to talk about a lot of things that are going on in the world this morning. So from 5 to 7 on ABC 10 Morning Blend, don't mind me as I put my water down, we know that there was breaking news that happened during the show. There's been another school shooting, and this is at a high school in South Maryland. And right now, what I'm listening to or what I'm seeing on Facebook is officials who are speaking and trying to give some details as to what's going on. South Maryland, 3 students injured. One of those injured is the shooter. Another one injured is in critical condition. We know there's a boy and there's a girl, in addition to the shooter who is male. An on-campus officer, we're learning, did step in or run in and try to stop this. So as we know right now, and we can only speculate, this could have been worse, right? There are no reported deaths at this point, and it is no longer an active scene. I was listening to some sound. CNN got on the phone with one of the students who was in lockdown, and the student was speaking and saying this happened in the art hall, and he was pretty far away from the art hall, but that the officers responded really quick. So there was a large presence in a matter of minutes. He said he felt safe in that moment, but they had not been escorted yet off campus. So that's the very latest out of South Maryland. Again, another school shooting, 3 injured, shooter in custody because one of the ones injured, the other's in critical condition. So we'll keep you posted on that. The other breaking news that are people commenting
People
on?
are already chiming in saying that it makes them feel so crazy and that they're afraid to leave the house at this point. And can you imagine what children are going through who, at this point, have seen a number of shootings in schools this year, and they're saying, you know what, at this point we're prepared for it because our teachers and our administrators have prepared us for it, but why again? Why us?
Only 1 month after the Parkland school shooting down in Florida, all of the stuff that has happened since then.
And this time it's a school. Not too long ago, it was a church.
Right.
And not too long ago, it was a concert. And not too long ago, it was a school. So
a club.
The focus is on schools lately, especially with legislation getting put together in the state of Florida, specific to schools. But this gun violence happens everywhere all the time.
Right.
And in the topic of violence, more violence happening in Texas.
Right.
So we also learned that overnight, this was just after midnight, there was another bomb that went off inside of a package, this time at a FedEx facility. And so we know that the 4 packages that exploded were in Austin, Texas last week, or at least earlier this month. So this makes it the 5th package that went off just about an hour south near San Antonio. And this is in Shirts right outside of San Antonio in Texas. And then we were hearing of another one that has been found, and it is also back in Austin. Now, the interesting part, and Walt, you did the story this morning, the interesting part about the package that was found near San Antonio was that it was on its way to Austin.
Yeah, when you talked about the proximity of an hour's distance, that was the first thing I thought of, is that's close enough. And how are packages getting to Austin? I mean, they're probably shipped there, so that's a pretty close within an hour's drive. So I don't know where the other packages were coming from. But if this was in Shirts, Texas, I don't know if this is a major transfer facility or maybe the suspect is mailing all of these packages from Shirts, Texas. So I don't know. But this is not a new way of being an anarchist. It's just sad to see all the things we have to talk about in the news these days. But it did remind me initially of the Unabomber, which was a huge worldwide, national, and California story in the 1990s, where a brilliant mind, and Ted Kaczynski, who was educated at Harvard, was an assistant professor at Cal Berkeley, was railing against modern technology and how that was going to undo the world in terms of the internet and communication, and some of the stuff that he was complaining about has come true, but the bombing part, not so good. But yeah, the shipping and mailing of packages to specific targets over a long period of time.
17 years.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And he insisted on having his manifesto printed in the Washington Post. And Janet Reno, who was the then Attorney General, said, let's do this, because he says he'll stop bombing if we print his manifesto. They did it, and Ted Kaczynski's brother David read it and goes, this is my brother, and here's where he is. Go find him.
The investigator at the time had also pushed that the Post, or one of the publications push it out because he had suspected that if they did that, someone will come to light and say, oh, this sounds familiar, and in case it did, which was smart. And I'm like, where is that investigator now?
Exactly.
He retired in 07, and it helps in these. There was a show, Unabomber was it's a Netflix series. I haven't seen it, but it goes into depth on this. Incredible.
Don't know if this guy is driving any type of an agenda, though.
Right.
I mean, it could be
or if
just
it's a
somebody,
guy or if it's one person.
Somebody who may have gotten kicked out of the University of Texas and is taking it out on the city. You know, all of these shootings, we try to find something sane that we can identify with in these things as a motive. But, you know, people are unsettled who do these things, and it could be something as simple as that. You know, school shootings, not only have there been a lot of shootings, but certainly locally there's been, there was the recent story we covered last week at Kennedy High School with a threat which actually cleared out the entire school. Issues at McClatchy High School as well.
How about the stabbing overnight?
Yeah, it's, you know, we sit here and we're like, what is going on? And it's, you know, there's a lot of mentally unstable people out there, and maybe we could talk all about guns, and we do.
Right.
And we could talk all about this and that, and we do, but the people who are committing these crimes are mentally unstable. So what do? Go out and fix them all? Do we identify them before they commit a murder? I think that's crazy to think that we can do all that.
I don't
really
think
do.
that people feel it's crazy, though. Trying to get into the psychology of behind why people do these mass attacks is what people are asking on social media day in and day out after each and every one of these attacks. But then the second question is, how did this happen in terms of how did FedEx allow these things to be shipped? Why didn't we learn from a Kaczynski, even though it was, what, 19 years ago at this point? A lot of years ago? We want to know the inner workings of the minds of the people that harm us and that put us at risk. But at the same time, we just want results. And I think that's what I'm really seeing on social media.
The results are going to be very expensive. The results are going to be very expensive in terms of, you know, metal detectors at anything you go in and out of. It's going to be an expensive scanning system of every package that is shipped. And even when you're scanning them, these detonation devices are designed to look like, you know, it could be a cake. You know, I don't know that a scan is going to determine this explosive or metal or shrapnel or anything like that.
And luckily, the one overnight, no one was injured. There was one report of the woman at FedEx who said after she heard intense ringing in her ears, and so that was the first report that someone has been injured, but they've cleared that. No one injured, luckily, in this case.
Right, but to go back to mental health, the difficult thing about mental health is that it's not illegal to be mentally ill, and in many cases, it's not their fault. I mean, let's face it. If your chemistry is wrong in your brain, if it's off, it changes the demeanor, it changes the thought process, and all of these things. So yes, everyone should spend time, money, energy, and effort to identify those that could be a risk. But the problem is that you can only keep an eye on these individuals until they commit the crime, and then it's too late. So, I mean, they did this whole movie on this with Tom Cruise, and I hate to go into all this. I think it was called Minority Report, and they had the pre-crime unit. So perhaps someday in the future, right, that's the idea, and the hope is that you can identify individuals and step in the moment before something that can't be taken back happens. But yes, mental health it seems to be the thread that connects a lot of this, but what can you do about it? Really, it's difficult, it's expensive, it's not a perfect science. Some people are mentally ill. It's not their fault. Maybe they would never commit a crime, yet they may have the consequences as if they committed the crime anyway. I mean, it's a very difficult problem.
So when you stop the Vegas shooter, the Vegas shooter like checked out. I mean, in terms of
it had an entire agenda.
He was a successful, wealthy real estate investor. He legally owned all his guns. Nobody is like, really? And I mean, when this happened, you look at this guy and you go, how would it? You would not have suspected he would do something like that. So even him being on a mental health radar, which he wasn't. I mean, and there are mentally ill people who are not dangerous. So then you got to whittle that list down to mentally ill people who could do a mass shooting. And it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much. So much here.
Of it all.
How do you? Where do you start?
That's what a lot of people are commenting on exactly that right now, saying that after all of these happenings, people say, hey, it's not the right time to talk about gun control. It's not the time to talk about reform. But at the end of the day, isn't that the answer? You can't figure out who these people are and where they will be at any given time, but you can make sure that unhealthy people aren't within an arm's length of something that could hurt tons and tons of people.
Well, it looks to me now like the Las Vegas shooter was extremely unhealthy, but there is nothing ahead of that would have detected that.
Red flags.
I don't think there's anything that would have stopped the Vegas, the Parkland, Florida, with the
Those were all the
Nicholas
signs
Cruz.
there.
Yeah, it was all there in that one.
That was a misstep.
And then
for
several of the other ones too. I'm using the example of the Vegas one, which is unusual because that thing you would not pick that guy to do what happened there because it was nothing.
Unless you track it all the way back to when they were growing up and they were left out in school and they were bullied. I mean, but see, this is a grown
where are you
man.
getting that information?
But see, last week it was interesting during the National School Walkout, right?
Okay.
And everyone was walking out. A lot of schools were participating, and there was the one school, was it locally, who was having the walk up. And they wanted their students to walk up to people
and talk to people they normally don't,
who are quote unquote loners at school, introduce themselves and say hi. And I thought, whoa, like for the first second when I heard that, I'm like, it's kind of random. Like in a school walkout day, they're having a walk up. Then it's like, hello, that's getting to more of the root of the issue here. These kids, like the Parkland kid, yearning for no excuses for him, but yearning for this love and attention, clearly, because his parents, he's adopted, both of his parents died. Lived with a family. He had guns. They were locked up. All the signs in the world was on YouTube commenting, putting his info. It's almost a cry for help. Putting information out there. I'm going to be a professional school shooter. I mean, if that's not a cry for help, I don't know what is. So getting to the root of it with the bullying thing was an interesting take on it. But then again, you go back to how do you stop that? Bullying has been around since the beginning of time.
Well, I remember a story, and I don't know if we did it on Extra Shot or Morning Blend, about a teacher who every week would poll her students and ask them to tell her who was the person they would want to have lunch with, who's the person they wouldn't want to have lunch with. And from that data, she was able to figure out who the loner in the classroom was. And each week would go out of her way to make sure that that person was more integrated into class the next week. That is what
asking
we can do.
Questions. The teachers taking time. This wasn't anything implemented into the curriculum.
Not at all.
Nationally, that was her way of getting into the minds of these young kids, because then she said she would look at it week to week and find the trends.
Exactly.
If little Johnny was constantly the guy that nobody wanted to hang out with, and he constantly was the one that no one was having lunch with, let's go up to Johnny and make him feel a certain way.
And it could be a small thing and a small moment that could change that life forever. You don't know.
And everyone else's lives.
You know, going back to another story that was discussed here about teen suicide and suicide in general, there's a documentary on people that have committed suicide off the Golden Gate Bridge. And one person that jumped off the bridge and survived said, I was just waiting on the bridge. If one person talked to me, stop, because I was clearly distressed. If one person would have talked to me, I know I wouldn't have done it. And so it's that moment. I mean, now, you know, and it's a difficult thing because we can't make everybody's situation our own search situation. There are right times to step in. My only point is that it could be a small thing. Are you okay? That could really change the course of that person's life, or if they are apt and capable of doing more harm to more people, it could save the lives of many people. It may just be, are you okay? Maybe that's just it. And they will respond how they respond, but just one thing could change everything.
Comes down to love and just wanting to be, the desire to love and want to be loved. I mean, that's really the core of all of this, right? So thank you for your comments right now. People
Cynthia is saying kudos to that teacher, and I think we can all agree.
I have to figure out where she is from.
I know.
We should go back and find
I don't remember exactly where she was from, but then we have other people who are saying that that's putting undue stress on that teacher who is already strapped because she doesn't have she or he doesn't have the resources that they need to make sure that these kids are educated in the first place.
She wanted to do it the way it came off.
No, she definitely did, but say we wanted this to be implemented across schools, across the nation.
And let me just add one quick thing too. Whether it's the kid in Florida, Nicholas Cruz, or if it's Ted Kaczynski, there is one common thread there. Maybe their mental illness, what we perceive to be as their mental illness, we have not diagnosed them ourselves, but you get what I'm saying, is that there's a lot of isolation. I mean, Ted Kaczynski lived in a one-bedroom cabin in the middle of, I think, Montana by himself
Rural
for a
Montana.
long time, allowing his fantasies to manifest themselves again and again and again. There was no one to step in and interact and say, this is not right.
He was in that Montana cabin for 17 years.
Yeah.
And what drove him over the edge was he had his favorite spots he could hike to, and then one day somebody plowed a road through it because of the expanding tourism and all this. And he was trying to get away from civilization and technology, and somebody put a road in through his favorite little fishing pond, and that was enough that caused him like, okay, that's it. I'm trying to get away from this, and they won't let me. So that was his breaking point. Everybody has one.